All right, so in general, just to set the background for what this technology is doing, here on the left, I just have Siege running, and it's literally just hitting a bunch of WordPress sites that I'm hosting on Apache, and that's all back-ended by MySQL database. So basic web database example, right? And over here, you guys can see there's just a whole bunch of connections being established to the MySQL server. Those of you that are familiar with the MySQL port 3306. So, excuse me. What we set out to do was give users an understanding of where these connections were happening. We had a lot of customers say, hey, we just support the environment, or we're just monitoring the environment. We don't exactly know where everything is. Sometimes we have to go to this team, we have to get information. Sometimes we have to go to that team, we have to get information. Can you guys just give us a way to automatically understand where servers are communicating, application servers communicating with each other? And more specifically, not like custom applications like you see in tracing as an ability to discover, but these COTS applications, right? I've just got these application servers that are commercial off the shelf. I didn't write these. I just need to get a perspective on how they're communicating. So what we did is we created what we called application dependency mapping. And really the whole purpose is to collect that data that we just saw going on those servers and correlate that information. So really all you have to do is just have one of these servers being monitored by server and application monitor. And this allows you to then see what's communicating with it, right? What's making those established connections. So for example, I've got my MySQL server. And I'm monitoring the MySQL process. And I believe I'm also monitoring the port on it as well. And based upon that, Server and Application Monitor is able to determine that I've got connections happening to that specific server. So you guys can see here on my details page for where I'm monitoring MySQL that I've got several different inbound connections happening to MySQL on this particular server itself. And I can tell, depending upon what I am or am not monitoring on the other side, what is actually connecting to that. So in this instance, I have actually multiple different things trying to communicate with the MySQL server. One of them is just kind of something that I created as a different connection just to show that there's differences coming in there. And the other is the actual Apache server connecting back to the MySQL server. The whole purpose of this really, once we dug into this a little bit further, was not just to be able to show that automatic mapping, but also identify that there is a connection that's there and give the administrator some perspective into that connection itself. So we just said, okay, well, let's, what's important between two applications from your perspective, Mr. Systems Administrator, and understanding where problems could arise once you now have this perspective. And the two big answers were latency and packet loss. If I can see there's high latency between those two servers, I can identify that is a potential root cause of my problem. Or if there's high packet loss, again, that could be affecting it. So I need to know, is there performance issues on the one side of the equation or the other? Or is there actually performance issues in between the two? So once we're all said and done with this development, we said, great, we can give you both sides of the equation because we're already able to monitor the operating system and the applications that are running on it. And now we have this ability to understand, based upon what the operating system and application is telling us is actually happening, the connections that are being established, we can take that connection information and we can probe the connection between the two. So that's very, very important to highlight. We are not actually doing a packet sniff here. We're not collecting what the actual connection is from the network itself. We're doing a synthetic probe. We did that for one main reason. We got a lot of feedback that in these types of scenarios, especially these commercial off-the-shelf applications, a lot of people didn't want to do deep packet sniffing. They didn't want to collect data from the network traffic itself. But what they did want to do is get an understanding specifically associated with that process and that port that the communication was happening. So we decided to go down the path and say, okay, cool, we can give you a synthetic probe. Those of you familiar with NetPath, very similar concept. in terms of identifying what is the actual port that you're trying to establish the communication on, and doing that synthetic probe to measure the response time and the hops that are happening. Same basic principle applies here, where we're understanding what is that port that the communication is actually happening on, and then doing a synthetic probe just to say, okay, what is the latency and packet loss between those two.
What do you mean by synthetic probe?
So we have a mechanism on one side that will essentially do a ping, if you will, for that particular port. So it's doing just sending.
So you're talking about installing an agent somewhere.
Correct. So that's a perfect point. This is an agent-based technology. So we have the Orion agent that we use today that actually can collect a whole bunch of different things and do a whole bunch of different things. We said, let's add this probe capability into the agent. So it does the two factors. It collects the data in terms of understanding which, what connections are actually happening, and then it's also responsible for the probe. So if you have the agent just deployed on one side, then we'll understand that there's a connection happening. But if you want to get an understanding of the latency and packet loss, you need to deploy that agent and that probe on the other side to actually measure it across.
Do you have an agentless approach?
We do not today. So when we were prototyping this, we were thinking agent versus agentless and how exactly we would achieve that. We found out that the agent-based mechanism was a little bit more simplistic to be able to get out there and get deployed for our customers. So we went down that approach. We're looking at an agentless-based capability, but we haven't brought that forward yet.
What about dealing with containers?
So that's a great question. One of the things that we are actually working on right now is container-based monitoring for server and application monitor itself, and we have the full intention to ensure that we can do this approach with that as well.
So say I have 6,000 microservices running on any given box.
Yep.
Is your agent able to handle that?
That is the intention.
Okay.
That is absolutely the intention. Scalability testing will prove one way or the other.
So you haven't done that yet?
We're in, I'd have to go back and check. It's something that we're working on right now.
But the standard agent does?
Correct.
This is a new feature that you don't know about yet?
That I don't know from a container standpoint. So we haven't modeled against containers yet because we're still working.
No, I'm talking about 6,000 generic microservices.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not talking containers. I have 6,000 threads running on a process. This is a live system. It has 6,000 threads and probably a couple of thousand processes.
Yep.
Does this go down to the thread level or just the process level?
Just the process level. Today, just the process level.
Any chance you can think about getting into the thread level? Because that would be incredibly powerful.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We had to walk before we could run.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, and again, this wasn't supposed to be that just massive, robust, like there's a whole lot of things going on here. We wanted to make this a very simple process. We've really brought this down into like a one-click agent deployment. So if you don't actually have the agent deployed, you can do a one-click agent deployment. And just simply turn it on and see the data. We also have some out-of-the-box alerts that we've configured for this. Because one of the things that I strived very significantly is alerts are both the most important thing for a monitoring solution and usually the bane of most people's existence from a monitoring solution standpoint. So we define these out-of-the-box alerts to be very, very simplistic. The intention here is it's going to let you know when you've breached a threshold, and we've got thresholds defined for both critical and warning, both at a global standpoint and on an individual connection standpoint. And then it simply will just notify a user when, or send an email or whatever notification trigger that you have defined for your alerts to actually send that communication out and let them know, like, hey, you're having a connection problem. So now I can see, am I having a performance issue with the application itself, right? Am I monitoring something that's having a problem there on one side or the other, or am I having a connection issue? So oftentimes what we see customers go through the troubleshooting steps is they're notified by some mechanism that there's a problem. Whether it's a help desk ticket or someone made a phone call or they got an alert. But they don't necessarily know where that root cause is going to end up. So oftentimes they will go to one of those points of interest. And so all I have to do is simply navigate to that application details page, that node details page in Server and Application Monitor, and I can see this information available. So we made it available across those different details pages, so I can see the context of the connection along with the application performance. And in this instance, as an example, I actually introduced artificial latency into this one just to show the difference between a non-critical and a critical connection. But in this scenario, I can very easily see that I'm not having a performance issue with the application itself. I'm not having a performance issue with the server itself on either side. But what I do see is there's actually an issue with connectivity between one of the Apache servers and the MySQL server itself. So it gives me a quick view and an understanding of is it the application or is it the network? And I always contend that it's usually always the network, but that's because I'm a systems guy and not a network guy.
As long as you're not blaming the storage.
No, it's not. It's never the storage's fault. But latency could be the problem associated with the storage, right? So that's really it. I know we're crunched for time today, but I wanted to give you guys just a quick view of this new capability that's being released in SAM 6.6. And if you have any questions, let me know.